Hello and welcome to another episode of a Wicked Parley. Tonight we're going to be discussing alien life out in the cosmos. Oh my gosh. Oh god, no. Oh man. Alright. So, with any good conversation, feel free to leave a comment or a question in the chat. And when we get to it, we'll get to it and we'll respond. So hopefully you guys have some things to say. And also, welcome. Hi, Kyle. Hi, host. Welcome to tonight's stream. All right. So, without further ado, let's get into the topic, shall we? All right. Alien life. Well, it is, of course, an interesting idea and field, that of, we'll call it, alien science, looking at perhaps the biology of aliens in other parts of the world and the universes at large. The multiverse, as it were, of aliens, perhaps. And I think any good conversation when it comes to discussing aliens probably should begin where exactly could alien life exist? What parts of the universe could those little alien bastards be hiding out? And to more specifically than anything else, is where exactly would intelligent life be? So I think we can first frame this by stating, fairly obviously, that life is probably just about everywhere that you can find an energy source, anywhere that you can find the basic raw ingredients. And so I would imagine life is fairly abundant. However, intelligent life, doesn't seem to be so good. I don't think the odds of intelligent life are very likely, and I think are extremely rare. And the reason for this is that intelligent life has to take a certain route. Now, you can be pretty confident in saying that intelligent life probably takes multiple routes. There's not one set way of reaching the goal. But it's probably fairly likely that intelligent life is going to need a whole bunch of time. That time's going to be variable, but to us, it's going to be a long time. And because of that, there are certain regions of space that are kind of dangerous. So, obviously, if you are near the beginning, or we'll call it the center of most universes, that's a pretty dangerous place to be. And the reason why it's dangerous is because stars often form really fast, and they die really fast. So, the time that it would take to develop enough technological know-how to essentially travel throughout space and potentially to other stars, the odds are is that it takes longer to do that than the planet is habitable, or the moon, or whatever it might be. And that's assuming it's a biological life that we understand, which I think is an important other element to discuss, and something that we will continue later. I see Kyle has a question. Rose, would you mind reading it?
So, Kyle states, where would intelligent life be? I don't know. We haven't found intelligent life on Earth yet.
Indeed. And your comment is quite interesting as well. The one you responded back to.
The whole fair enough, but if you got to speculate about what type of environment might you need?
Yeah, that's a fun one.
It's always fun to speculate about, what makes you thrive, what makes you not.
Yeah, exactly. I think that when it comes down to it, it's a funny little quip, obviously, I guess, considering the fact that we are very stupid. We're a stupid species. Wow. But we definitely are, I think, individually, we are fairly intelligent. I think it's only because of mob mentality and of tribalism that we are lacking. I think individuals today are actually pretty darn smart. And I think that eventually when, as an overall society, we can kind of reach some common ground with a lot of problems, and we don't pull a Russia, we'll probably
Don't get started with that right now.
Yeah, I know. I'll talk about that.
Stay away from that.
I'll talk about that in the near future, maybe. So let's talk about what exactly intelligent life kind of needs, right? So we know that for a fact that you need to have some sort of energy that comes in, and obviously a sort of cycle systems of stuff that's coming in and coming out. In order to have the processes of basic chemistry and biology to work. On Earth, it's speculated that it was hydrothermal events. might have been the first places where life took off, because you had a combination of energies and sources being, and also just like raw material that was being in abundance. But there's a lot of materials that are used for intelligent stuff that a lot of people don't really like think about. And that previous picture kind of showed a really neat way of kind of wrapping your head around some of the things you might not necessarily like think. Because I think there's some things that you're like, oh yeah, titanium is kind of used in a whole bunch of different stuff, but aerospace uses it for a lot of things, right? You can also think about how aluminum is used for like airplanes, and you could think about like, I guess you can think about lithium in certain batteries and other components of things that are intimately interconnected to vast sums of our life. I don't think a lot of people recognize just how much electricity plays a role in almost every avenue of the modern life. And because of this, it's very difficult, I think, to make the case that, at least on Earth, with what we understand today, that it would be replicated in a time scale that would be, exponentially shorter to find life forming in a similar avenue. However, there is the other notion that perhaps, species that evolve, maybe they evolve in different ways. And I think that's probably, I think that's obvious if you think about it, because the conditions by which life exists today and the way in which life evolved on Earth are definitely not going to be the same somewhere else. Unless they also have a moon, a big moon. They're going to have gas giants in the outer orbit. They have a G-type star, and there's nothing too energetic happening, and things are pretty calm. Otherwise, they're going to have a completely different conditions by which they're created. And so they're going to have different obstacles to overcome. And the more they overcome, maybe it accelerates certain areas of build and technology, which could impact the way in which they evolve and the way they interact. And so they could get to space much faster. However, there is another thing that's kind of important to also think about, and something that I spoke about before in a previous episode. I don't know if it was on the alien episode or if I was just talking about stars and space in general, but it is the idea of scale of the universe. Now, you can think of like a wedge, right? If you imagine like a wheel of cheese and you take a wedge, that wedge of cheese would be the hypothetical known universe, everything that's visible. The rest of the wedge is so far away that light hasn't had time to travel to us. And in fact, because of inflation, will never reach us. So there could be an alien civilization today, right now, at the edge of that particular point in space, and it will never be able to communicate with us. Ever. And because of this, and because of these crazy sorts of distances, to me, the idea of alien life, intelligent alien life, existing in a way that could communicate with us, on a one-to-one, is going to be focused to just the Milky Way galaxy, I think. Because I think even the distance between Andromeda and here is just, it's so vast that, think about this. If you were to look at Andromeda, you're not seeing it as it is today. You're seeing as it was 2.5 million years ago. And so what organism is going to look at the Milky Way galaxy and be like, yeah, there's intelligent life there? Because what was roaming around 2.5 million years ago on Earth? It wasn't us. Okay? Or if it was us, it was our very hairy ancient brethren. It's just the idea that we're going to be able to detect an alien presence, from just like observing things, I think is pretty rare. Probably not going to happen. Yeah, space cheese, right? So delicious. Anyways, so now that we've kind of narrowed down the universe to a point where we can kind of deal with it, right? Then we can start thinking about, okay, what places in the Milky Way galaxy, or the things that are in some of the satellite galaxies that orbit the Milky Way galaxy, because, there's that, the Magellanic Clouds. What areas of those places potentially could even be habitable to aliens, to people that, we recognize as intelligent life forms that could communicate. And I think the obvious signifier for intelligent for us is probably going to be a technological signature. So what will likely happen is that we'll see some sort of weird emissions from a distant planet. Okay, not those kind of emissions. Okay, more like chemical, compositional, evidence, let's say hypothetically.
So that's what you meant.
Yeah, so hypothetically, maybe like a methane or like some sort of gas that shouldn't be there in the atmosphere that is a clear artificial pollutant that we would detect. That would be the first sign that there was life there, and depending on the type of chemical would depend upon the potential for it being advanced technological life, right? And then perhaps maybe someday in the distant future, we are able to somehow send or receive a signal from that place. That's probably how that would begin. I seriously doubt that alien life would traverse the universe in some sort of fancy beyond science fiction, excuse me, like idea in a spacecraft and come down and like take us to your leader. Like that's probably not gonna happen that way. And I think even a technological life form, like if you look at what we do, right? We don't send people to distant parts of our solar system to explore. We don't send people to Jupiter, you know, in like 2001: A Space Odyssey style, you know, thing. We send a probe. We send a robot who can survive the dangers, and if they don't survive, then it's like it's a robot. It didn't have life. So, yeah, I think that's probably how an alien civilization would do it too. Because think about it, like you have to find a way to deal with the whole whatever biological need the organism needs to survive, anything that's necessary for like, you know, their mental sanity, or anything else. And assuming the travel time is anything, you know, like what we're imagining, where it's like, you know, they're in there, they're moving at the speed of light or near it, and you know, they're traveling to us. And even when you can take into consideration time dilation, which in simplified terms more or less means that they experience less time traveling than the time that it takes to actually do it. So it might have taken 100 years, technically speaking, from where they came from, but when they arrived at their destination, they've only aged like 10. That's just a rudimentary explanation. So, you know, there's that. Okay, so let me take a pause right there for a quick second, right? Let's address Kyle's statement, if you don't mind, Rose.
Kyle states there's actually a possibility that Venus has life on it because there was a gas found there that is commonly produced by life forms. Can't remember the gas's name. And also, didn't you argue in a previous episode that aliens have visited the Earth?
Nice calling me out, Kyle. Nice calling me out. Okay, so yes to both of those things, actually. Yeah, so the scientists did detect a type of gas. But I would like to also note when it comes to that is that while gas emissions are typically, you know, like kind of like they can be indicators, they don't represent actual proof. They just mean that there's a high possibility, or there's something that's similar on Earth that does this, which means that it could be that. I think the biggest thing to take away from the Venus thing is that Venus is an extremely geologically active body because of all of the volcanism that's going on and how the surface continuously changes. And also the fact that Venus at one point was a body very similar to Earth. And so we don't know exactly how long it was Earth-like before it became runaway greenhouse, right? So it could have had certain types of early organisms that perhaps lived and died, and those emissions were trapped in something, and then maybe it was melted, eroded, or something like that, and then released in the atmosphere, and we're detecting that release now. It would be almost like kind of like if there was oil, and then somehow oil was detectable in the atmosphere. You know, something along those lines. It's kind of like what was a potential. So while life could be there, it might not be life as we are hoping for. And even if it is life as we're hoping for, the life that's there is microbial in nature. And it is entirely possible that the life that's being detected, it might be some sort of like cousin of Earth life. So either way. Okay, and then to answer the other question, yes, I did say there was probably a really strong chance that aliens perhaps visited Earth in the past. I think there is oddities that have existed that, to me, suggest that aliens could very well exist and have potentially visited us. But, and I say this with a but, while I am reasonably confident that alien life exists in the universe, and I remain open-minded to the idea that aliens could have come to the Earth. I do not think that the evidence that was put forth by the United States government in the form of unidentified flying objects is evidence of alien life. What I think it's evidence of is that UFOs are real. Unidentified flying objects, unidentified aerial phenomena as it's known today, definitely in some point did happen. There are things that aren't accounted for. What those things are, it's not well understood. But as this particular incident happened, in Phoenix, no one knows what the hell that is. It's super big. It's clearly a big ass structure. Who knows? Was that actually a thing? Was that something that was alien, or was that some sort of top secret huge technology that's a local government potentially has been operating on? Who knows? I'm not prepared to say that's guaranteed aliens. What I would say is that's guaranteed a unidentified flying object that could potentially be aliens, or it could be something else, and I'm just kind of open to both.
Alrighty then.
So, all right. So one of the things I want to kind of discuss is the fact that there's like a whole bunch of reasons why I think aliens are exciting and to talk about, but I also think there's a whole bunch of things that kind of can be debunked about alien encounters and things like that. I think one of the biggest and most obvious things that often gets cited whenever they talk about how aliens, reasons for why intelligent aliens would want to interact with humans or interact with things on Earth, period. And they always point to the fact that we have large bodies of water. Now, you might think, yeah, we have, this, it's like 75% of the surface of the Earth is covered by water. But that's just the surface of the Earth. That's not like the planet by its whole. So while we think there's a lot of water, there's not nearly as much water as you might imagine. And in fact, there are vast stores of water on many of the moons surrounding the Jovian system in Jupiter. And there's a lot of water that's actually in some of the atmospheres of the gas and ice giants. So if you were coming to the solar system and you're like, I need water, Earth is probably one of the last places you'd want to get it, because as you transport water, especially in space, it's gonna freeze. So the fact that it's liquid doesn't really matter in that equation. It's not really a thing, right? And then the other thing to take into consideration when it comes to this is that it's just not that rare in the universe, just in general. So you take a further step back, just outside of the solar system. If you look at the chemical composition of the vast portion of the universe, hydrogen and oxygen, and just water in general, is very abundant. Okay, and so when you think about the idea of the Earth being this rare, watery world, it's it's not that watery. It's probably not that rare either. So that's just one of the things that I wanted to kind of debunk. And then another one of the big ones, big ones that often gets kind of thrown out there, is the fact that we have precious metals, right? We have gold, silver, platinum, blah, 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 right? But they're only rare and precious metals to Earth because they're rare on the Earth. There are entire asteroids filled with tons of rare materials, quote unquote, out there in space. Okay. And, if you want to learn a little bit more about this, you can check out the YouTube channel Brightside, where they can kind of just go over some of the things. You can kind of click on this and you can kind of look at it if you want to know. But there are asteroids out there, right, that would bankrupt the world economy. All right, they're just there. If we really needed the materials, we could just go mine asteroids and we'd have infinite supplies of a lot of this. Well, not infinite, but a shit ton, way more than you could ever find on the Earth. So it's not really it's not really a thing that we really need to be too concerned with when it comes to that. And I don't think it's a reason for alien life to come and check us out. And then the last of the big ones that I think I want to talk about has to do with breeding. Okay. Now, a lot of people think that aliens might come to the Earth to probe you, take genetic samples, make weird hybrids. And I'm just going to say that the evidence to support this is, we'll say, unreliable, to say the rest. But there might be a hint, there might be a slight nod to this in a later segment of the episode. Because while it is ridiculous, there is an element of it that's semi-ish understandable. I wouldn't even go so far as to say plausible, but I would say like an interesting notion, we'll say. Okay, let's take a look. Is there anything in the chat that I should be responding to, Rose?
Not at the moment. Just interacting with some of the audience about a ongoing space joke.
Okay. All right. Lovely. Okay. Okay. Glad you're having fun. Okay. All right. Well. Okay. So then, why? So the next thing is why might alien life or intelligent alien life want to come to the Earth and check us out? And you might find there's a large list of reasons why. I think the first and most obvious thing is that there is one commodity that Earth does have that is completely unique to Earth. Nowhere else in the known universe has anything even slightly similar. And that is the fact that we have life forms that have uniquely evolved under the conditions that are present on Earth. Now, that might not sound all that impressive, but when you consider the sheer number of species that have existed on the Earth, and you think about the type of hostile conditions by which life found ways of, we'll say, persisting through, it's quite remarkable and would be something that would be worth traveling across the universe to understand, because it might give key insights to their own evolution, biology, and story. Just like if we interacted with them, we could learn something perhaps about our own from things that happened to them, or know things about the future that could shape life moving forward. So that would be one of the, I think, the biggest argument for why intelligent life would even bother with Earth in the first place. Because as you know, host mentioned before, we're the universal truck stop. I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think we're more like the lone bus stop in the middle of nowhere. That's, you know, got no town, no anything, hundreds of miles away. So I think is more accurate. We have like the bench and like the dusty sign, and like that's it. Like we don't have nothing. Just fields around. Anyways. So, you know, I think that another thing that we can consider is that, you know, when it comes to life forms in general, I don't think that we can even argue that humans are the most intelligent life forms on the planet. An alien life might be more interested in looking at arthropods like octopus, or look at, you know, perhaps some of the whales or dolphins, because they also seem to be able to communicate with one another, and yet they don't destroy their world. And I think that if, you know, an alien intelligence were going to come to the Earth and to study life, I think when it comes to humans, I think it would not necessarily be wanting to interact with us as more understand our behavior, because our behavior is so erratic and destructive that it seems counterproductive. And so it's like kind of like, why didn't evolution kind of take us out? And so, so I think it's very difficult to suggest that. I think, you know, the alien life would want to come specifically to interact with us. Now, you know, I think one of the things that we really get wrong, like a lot, I think has to do with the fact that aliens will travel across the universe, and they come to Earth, and they just land, and they say hi, or they try to conquer the world. And I just don't feel like that's the way it would go down. I think the first thing that it would have to overcome when it comes to it is our own form of life itself, and the biological challenges that life itself has to deal with. And you can look at perhaps what happened to the indigenous peoples of the Americas when they came in contact with Europeans for the first time. Vast, you know, hundreds of thousands, Some estimates put it upwards as high as 10 million indigenous people died to the various plagues that the European settlers brought with them that they had immunity to that the indigenous people didn't. And that is a big problem if you think about it, because if life, essentially evolved under completely unique conditions, right? They would have built up defenses unique to their own thing. And if they brought it into our biome, then their contagions would interact with our life, and our life would have no means of understanding it. So it would be like a new plague that would just kind of rush through everywhere, and we would have very little defense, if any, to any sort of biological attack. And the same could potentially be true of alien life as well. So the idea that a advanced, smart, intelligent civilization just lands in front of the White House and says, "Hi, I'm here to conquer you," or "Hi, take me to your leader," it's not realistic. So, anyways, do we have any comments? It looks like Kyle and Huss have some things. Is it still an ongoing joke or no?
Brings up an interesting thing that I'd like to hear more about. They think aliens would want to study cows, and I'm curious as to why. Like, why specifically cows, besides, the trope that they would beam up a cow as you see in commercials and stuff like that? Is it just because of that, or is there, like, an actual reason? I'm not quite sure.
Oh my god. While we wait for that particular riveting response, we'll go down. No, it's okay. It's totally fine. Kyle, if you have a legit response to that, I sincerely hope so. Otherwise, oh my god. Anyways, so when it comes to the next section, I think the other thing to consider is that we have a really odd system, like solar system in general. And so, when you look at the universe, it looks like a lot of solar systems kind of look like a giant wrecking ball, or like a bowling ball hitting pins, or like a billiard table, with balls going in every direction. And yet our solar system seems relatively stable in comparison. Like the planetary bodies are kind of on a plane, that's pretty equal. While we do have debris that kind of orbits in weird ways, it's small. The vast majority of the objects kind of follow the same kind of path. And that's really unique when it comes to the way the universe is set up. The structure and order of our planets is also very kind of different than what we've been able to observe. While there are examples of multiplanetary solar systems, they aren't very common, first of all. And the ones that are, and it's even less common for them to be orderly. In fact, if memory serves me, I think the TRAPPIST system and I think Kepler something are some of the few examples of actual systems that are somewhat unified. The vast majority kind of look like a shotgun spread when you look at where their planets are located, and their orbital paths are just completely elliptical. It's quite disturbing, honestly. And so, the conditions by which life would exist under those kinds of worlds might be very, very different. One such example might be you might have a low gravity environment. So things that grow on those worlds might be very tall. So if there's plants, instead of having plants and trees that are a couple hundred feet, imagine them being as tall as skyscrapers. That's entirely possible in a low gravity environment.
Wow.
And then, there's also the other idea too, is the fact that, if you have animals in that kind of biome, they're probably going to have glide or flight as something that's easy, because it'll be easier to traverse. Like a globe like that in low gravity. Because if you can just kind of glide, then you're not going to have to put as much energy into it, which means that you might see bat-like structures or something along those lines. So, I see that Kyle has a response. Well, what do we got there?
Yes, they do. So for one, it was a South Park joke.
Naturally.
But they also think that cows and pigs are both very useful. They are used in the production of a lot of food and clothing. Pigs in particular would be a game changer to planetary travel, which I'm currently asking about. So. Okay.
Fair enough. Okay. I'll put it this way. Funny joke. South Park has that recurring joke. As for, pigs, I don't agree with that for a variety of reasons. But the big one is the energy it takes for upkeep would not match the energy you'd get out of it in any form of production. So, yeah. Anyways, but I mean, I'd love to hear your take on it. I mean, that seems like it'd be very different. Now, there is one thing that humans do that I think that isn't destructive and changing the environment and shaping and pumping all these horrible things into the atmosphere that would be a draw for alien life. I think one of the things that we do is we produce music and art. Now, that's incredibly different and probably not necessarily the things in which they would likely think about. You'd have to imagine that something that is able to traverse the universe probably has to have a pretty strong mathematical mind, or processes that would evolve in some sort of logarithmic thinking. And whenever you, at least in psychology, whenever you observe groups of people, typically speaking, you don't see people who are really good at math who are also really good at art. It takes a lot of creativity, and it's been argued that different parts of the brain are responsible for different types of actions. And this kind of leads to the whole idea of the left and right brain thinking, and that while one of the brain is kind of more artistic leaning and the other is more analytical and leaning, is kind of the reason for this. Now, that could be just unique to humans in our biology, but it might also be true of advanced intelligence, as we haven't really had a chance to study it. We just can speculate on it. And so even astrobiologists kind of indicate the fact that that might be a thing. So the fact that we have such a diverse set of things might be something that's interesting and unique in lots of ways. Okay, so I see Kyle had a response. Let's go ahead and hear it out.
Yes, they do. They add that pigs were used a lot in colonization. Pigs can't eat whatever, breed quickly. Most animals are sterile a year after getting off of a boat, but pigs do it like bunnies.
Okay, so there's a lot of extras to that. So what a lot of people don't know is that Europeans brought wild grasses with them when they traveled. And the vast majority of grass that's, let's say, in North America is not native to North America. It's actually a endemic species of life that is basically kind of like taking over everywhere. Like I think there's like less than 5% of their natural grasses still remaining. And so the reason why the pigs were able to eat when they got there is because they were, not only were they able to eat anything, but the byproducts by which was anything that was technically edible were all things that were technically biodegradable or able to be consumed by pigs. That is not true of things in space. And it would be very difficult to keep up that. Not to mention, pigs are also great breeding factories for a whole bunch of contagions. And I think the last thing you'd ever want is to be trapped inside a small space with something that's incredibly contagious and could potentially get you sick. And you'd be stuck inside this thing being sick, and it might either kill you or you create this like cycle of just agony. So I mean, I strongly, I mean, like when it comes to this, I mean, like I just pigs, no, like I just no, I'm all right. And so that's the same thing is true when it comes to a lot of the farm life, like a lot of animals that were brought over, goats and sheep and whatnot, that went alongside on the boats. That was the case, was that they ate a lot of the wild grasses. The wild grasses were basically slowly destroyed and in place where a lot of the Europeans. And so like you think of it like this too, like you have this like perpetual cycle of animals eating essentially the grasses that were brought over via like seeds and spores and whatnot, and then they would eat it, and then it would be put into the soil when they of course shit, and then those grasses then essentially got integrated into the soil, and so you just got this complete spread. So that's kind of like how that happened. So it's not something that you can't replicate what happened, like essentially during the 15th and 16th century when it came to the colonization of the Americas, to the colonization of other worlds. And I think that would be a mistake to try and make that notion. So I don't know. Like it's just a completely different thing. I think there's some things that are analogous. You can look at them particularly with the spread of diseases and the encountering of life that hadn't, built up resistant. That I think is a logical argument. But the idea of being, cultivating livestock, I think if you go into space, the chances are you're going to be eating a plant-based diet. I don't think that, and if you're going to eat protein, you're probably going to be eating cultivated insects or bugs of some kind, worms or something. You are not going to be eating livestock. I seriously doubt it. Anyways, so like I was saying before, alien life would be attracted potentially to Earthlings because of our art, because of our music, because of the parts of the culture that are unique to our own species that might be interesting. As they are interesting to us, it is possible they might be interesting to others. But I think the other major thing that might be interesting might not even have anything to do with life at all. I think it might have to do with the geology of the Earth itself. A lot of people don't recognize this, but Earth is a really rare world. It has a double core. It has a nickel-iron core. It got this because early, about 1.5 billion years into its life, a planet roughly the size of Mars hit us. And that's the collision hypothesis, which is the current hypothesis that's accepted by scientists today. There are wacky other ideas for how we got the core and the moon, but this is the one that's accepted by most of mainstream science, so it's the one I'm kind of going with. It's also the one I buy. And that is because there's a certain point where you rewind the clock when you look at the orbital path of the moon, and eventually the moon is touching the Earth, but then the calculation stops. And that's probably because it was probably this big giant mass that was just eventually kind of flung off of the surface of the Earth. So just that's my honest opinion when it comes to it. But in any case, the reason why we have two cores is because of that. And that might be something that'd be worthwhile looking at, because it might be another way in which you could artificially create Earth-like worlds. And that could be useful for engineering purposes, that could be utilized by higher intelligences that have the ability to manipulate planets. Because if you can replicate the effects of what's going on Earth, then you could theoretically replicate the conditions by which life like ours were created, and in that way you could create many Earth-like worlds. So that would be, at least that's my argument for life in the universe, and the idea behind intelligent life, the reasons for why they might come, the reasons for why they may or may not exist. If you guys have any comments or questions, or would like me to explain or elaborate on anything in the future, feel free to mention it in the comments section. If you want to join the Discord, join the Discord. If you haven't subscribed or anything, hit the subscribe, hit the like button. Those help out. And we cannot forget the fact that we have a Patreon. And if you want to come check out Patreon, then that's great. We'll be adding content. And once again, thank you very much, Jackie, for your support in Patreon. If you want to be a supporter on Patreon and have your name appear on the screen, go ahead and join there. And help us out, because the more you help out the show, the better the content will be. All right. If you want to potentially give suggestions for show topic and ideas, there is a tier for that on Patreon. But let's say you don't have the cash, and let's say that you just want to have your idea and want it considered. Well, you know what you can do? You can come join the Discord on Tuesdays and Thursdays and talk to me. And if you are interested in sharing your idea with me, I might entertain it. And you know what? This episode was entirely responsible due to host 2222. He's the one who gave me the idea, folks. So, if you want to pitch your idea, you want to have a discussion, or just hang out, I'll be there. And have a great rest of your night, everybody. I'll see you in the next one. Later.